Welcome, Gothamites, to a very special episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. Joining me, as always, is the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City and beyond. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi. Hello, Drea.
Hi, Brian.
Welcome home from WonderCon. This is a very special episode because we are not going to be talking about Harley Quinn in this particular episode. Instead, we're going to be playing you our panel from WonderCon 2025, which happened in Anaheim, California, just this past weekend. Our panel was opening night, 8 p.m. So it was a fresh crowd ready to go. We had two very special guests talking with us about analyzing Arkham Asylum and Batman's Rogues Gallery. Those guests were Kyle Higgins, writer for DC Comics, as well as others. He has written Nightwing. He wrote Batman Beyond 2.0. He also wrote Batman Gates of Gotham, along with Scott Snyder. He, all around good dude, creator of the Massive Verse out there right now. Radiant Black is his brainchild. Lovely person. Had a lot of really great things to say, as did Ernie Altbacker, who is a screenwriter. He has adapted a number of the DC animated movies, particularly ones based on a very popular series of comics. He did the adaptation for Batman Hush. And the both of you appeared on the bonus features for that. So we knew that Ernie would be a really good addition to the panel. And I thought it was a smashing success. What did you think?
I had so much fun. That panel could have been 2-3 hours. For folks who haven't been to one of our live panels or listened to an episode that is a recording from a live panel, it's a little bit different than our typical episodes. We definitely let our guests take center stage and talk about their involvement in the creation of characters, the psychology of characters. I really feel that it's important to give them that opportunity to talk about how psychology plays into media engagement as writers, creators, developers, folks who are telling these stories. And they did not disappoint. As you mentioned, Ernie was behind the creative adaptation of Batman Hush into a full-length animated film, which is not easy to do. That's a very long graphic novel, and he managed to work with a team to put that together. And you're right, Ernie and I are on the same documentary discussing the important character, actually two characters, Catwoman and Batman, from that film. And he gave us a little insider's knowledge about what writers do to adapt a script or to adapt a story into a different medium. So that was really exciting. Kyle is really, really introspective and has quite a bit to say about the psychology of the characters that he's created. And he's done an incredible job with a particular character that he talks about on the panel, in that he went and researched a specific condition, a very real life medical condition, actually, and created and developed a character based on that. So both writers created just a really great conversation, and I'm excited for people to listen to it.
Excellent. We are going to take care of some sad news right now, right before we play this panel for you. A couple days ago, we lost the iconic actor who once played Batman in one of your favorites, Batman Forever. Mr. Val Kilmer passed away of pneumonia. He'd been doing fairly unwell for the last few years, various medical conditions, but he passed away a couple days ago. So Dre and I would like to take this opportunity to dedicate this particular episode to one of our favorite Batmen, Val Kilmer. So with that being said, we hope you enjoy this panel. It's one that I think we're very happy with. And once again, we just had an absolute blast at WonderCon getting to meet many of you. And we're looking forward to some things down the road. So who knows where you'll see us next. Until then, though, Here is WonderCon 2025, the Arkham Sessions presents Analyzing Arkham Asylum.
Hey everybody, welcome to WonderCon 2025. Thanks for coming out on a Saturday night. It's WonderCon After Dark, which means we get to be a little adult, a little saucy.
It's Friday.
Basically, I'm sorry, it's Friday. Normally it's on Saturdays at like 8 o'clock. I don't know, it's where they put us. But yeah, this is an opportunity for us to get real nerdy up in here. My name is Brian Ward. I am the co-host of a podcast called the Arkham Sessions. We are a podcast dedicated to basically analyzing everything you grew up on but never quite outgrew. We've got a psychologist who takes pop culture and then sort of disseminates mental health information using all of your favorite shows and cool geeky stuff. We started out with Batman the Animated Series. We did the entire animated series and then kept going. We've done Doom Patrol, Steven Universe. We're currently working on the first season of Harley Quinn. So joining me is my co-host. By day, she is a clinical psychologist at UCLA. By night, she is a advisor and consultant to writers of film, television, comics. She's been written into canon as Batgirl's therapist by Gail Simone. She's Dr. Drea Letamendi.
Thank you.
Next to her, a wonderful writer of comics. He's also a producer, a director himself. He's done all kinds. He's a Renaissance man of all kinds of cool visual art. He is specifically written for DC Nightwing, Batman Gates of Gotham, which is absolutely fantastic, and Batman Beyond 2.0. He's Mr. Kyle Higgins. And then we have a wonderful screenwriter who's done a number of adaptations of some popular comics. One that I'm thinking of specifically, he was the screenwriter for the film adaptation of Batman Hush. Please welcome Mr. Ernie Altbacker.
Yes.
For starters, we just kind of wanted to go back to our roots. We want to go back to Gotham City. We want to talk about Arkham Asylum. We want to talk about Gotham's rogues, primarily because we've sort of reached this point in time when a lot of the rogues are now becoming the protagonists of their own movies, their own TV series. I can think of the Joker 2. Penguin, which is absolutely fantastic. 100%. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about that, why we are attracted to villains, but we've also had that conversation before. So we also want to break down what's wrong with the villains. And that's why we've got a psychologist on the panel. I want to ask, for starters, I want to ask our panel why you think that villains are so captivating from your expert lenses as both writers and a psychologist. Drea, why don't we start with you, go down the line here. Tell me why we love villains so much.
Well, as a psychologist and a fan of the Batman universe and a lot of these stories that these folks have written and have lent their creative minds to, I believe that villains are really important. Villains are driving the story, and I know other writers have said this, and I'm echoing their expertise. And I think, too, just as someone who studies the brain and works in psychology, that it's a really fascinating idea that the villain can carry the story and the hero is following and being motivated by that narrative. And then we as consumers, as audience members, as folks who are engaged in the story, we're also doing this kind of detective work, this curiosity, this mental, emotional labor of, why am I so interested in this character? And I think especially maybe in some deeper recesses of our psychology, what is it about that villain that I feel kind of related, or I'm relating to, or mirrors my experience, or mirrors something in my life? And I think that's a really great part of storytelling, especially in these genres, whether they're comic books, graphic novels, or adaptations in animation. My job is not just to work as a psychologist, but to lend my insights into those stories. But the creators and the writers really do a great job of being able to speak to that relationship much better than someone like I can. So I often will say storytelling and fictional storytelling especially is such an important part of developing your emotional repertoire. In some ways, it can be therapeutic. So even with a villain, as you said, kind of taking on this main character energy, I kind of think that that's healthy in a way to follow these stories and to be curious about that.
In a documentary that Drea appeared in, something that you just said reminded me of it, which is that the villain keeps things moving forward. One of the writers, actually, the documentary was Necessary Evil, the supervillains of DC Comics. One of the writers said that if you look at the protagonist as the character that sets the plan in motion and gets the plan rolling, then the villain is actually the protagonist. It's the hero that is the antagonist trying to stop everything from moving forward, which I always found interesting. Kyle.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think there's, just to piggyback on that, I think there's two really, as a creator, there's two really interesting avenues that good villains open up for you. The first is that, as Drea pointed out, there is a bit of a wish fulfillment there, because typically you're writing villains from fears of your own. You're tapping into the primal things that terrify you and manifest them in a physical form as a character, as a threat to our hero, right? So there is a little bit of, to the extent that your villains are relatable or have relatable qualities, they're the cautionary tales. And so there's a little bit of, in the way that people like horror films as a release, right? Because it's like safe escapism and scariness. Relating to villains has that quality to us who are like living our day-to-day lives, going to our jobs, and like living within the confines of what modern society kind of dictates we do, right? When you see someone breaking the law and going outside of those confines, it's kind of a rush and it's fun, right? The flip side of it too, of what a good villain does and why I think people love them, is that the better the villain, the better your hero has to be. So the better your villain is, the more that you're going to, as readers, see the aspects and accentuated that define the hero and what makes them so good at what they do. And so it really is kind of like, for me, I think anyway, it's coming from those two very kind of distinct places. And so the really funny little irony of it all, though, and I say this as someone who wrote a number of these books, when you're talking about villains getting, the more popular a villain, the more focus you have on the character, right? And inevitably you then have your own specials, your one-shots, your TV shows, your miniseries, right? And what inevitably happens? That villain ends up becoming an anti-hero, because the only place you can go with someone who's bad is finding a way to make them a little less bad, or fully not bad, right? And sometimes that ends up undercutting what the original intent and purpose of the character originally was. And you have to be careful. Like, you have to be careful you're not heading down kind of a story like dead end. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it is also fun when characters grow and evolve and change, and then you bring in fresh kind of talent and to fill their place. So,
for sure. Ernie, what do you think?
Well, for me, it's kind of like a natural thing that you're going to be focusing on the villain story, at least for the first half of the story, because the hero, by its very nature, the villain gets to start up the game, start up the plan. So he is proactive, and the hero is reactive up until a certain point where he's got to get his feet underneath him. So, really the first third of the movie or the comic or something is all on the villain has prepared the field. So you're kind of seeing his story and the effects of what he's planned and done. So for the first part at least, that the hero is kind of kept down. And I don't know, there is also a factor of just being able to cut loose, not going murderous or something, where everybody kind of goes, oh, it'd be fun to not follow the rules, not have a code.
I want to ask our two writers, especially, whether you're creating a new story or whether you're adapting one. We've seen a lot of these characters, a lot of rogues, of Gotham's rogues before. The Joker, we feel like we know the Joker. We feel like we know Two-Face, Clayface, the Penguin. We know Poison Ivy. How do you manage to keep it fresh? What is your personal what does your work look like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm really curious what, Ernie, you have to say about this as well, especially like on the times that you've adapted things, like when you're doing something like Hush, which is like interpreting something like a specific take already, Yeah, well, you go. Yeah, you jump in.
Well, I would say, yeah, adapting something like that. Obviously, that's Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee's masterpiece, but you're adapting it to another form, and they're giving you 72 minutes. It was 12 issues, right? So a lot of things have to be cut, unfortunately, and so it becomes this other thing where you're in the room at first of like, what if we do this? What if we combine that? What if we give this person this other arc? You don't have as much time. I mean, I think that specifically kind of like the Batman villains in Arkham are kind of like a cut above most everybody, because they're the people with kind of a good plan to face off against Batman, right? Like, as much as we all love them, right? Spider-Man, some of the villains of Spider-Man is like, well, there's a large man in a rhino suit getting up a head of steam toward the bank. I wonder what the plan is here. It's not hard to figure out. So, like, the villains of Gotham are actually, if you think of a plot as kind of like an obstacle course, it's a much harder obstacle course, and Batman is the world's greatest detective, so it's really an obstacle course that only he is fit to run, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Brian, what was the...
Tossed it back to you.
No, not at all, not at all. What was the... Can you... The
Just in
question
terms
again?
of keeping those villains that we feel like we've seen time and time again fresh for you, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So that's a really good. I think that's a great question. Like, it's actually one of the fundamental challenges with a property and a character like a franchise, really, like Batman, who's been around for so long and has seen so many different super talented creators tell incredible stories featuring him and his cast of characters. I've always thought that in like live action, there's only two ways to make a Batman movie. You either make Batman fit the world, which is what the Christopher Nolan movies do, or you make the world as weird as Batman, which is what the Burton films do. And I think the Matt Reeves movie actually does like this really interesting hybrid that I really dug, where it feels like all of the character of the specificity of the Burton films with this kind of modernism of the Nolan stuff and this very kind of groundedness. And I think that it kind of applies to the approach with the villains, is like, what version of Gotham are you working in and what version of Batman are you exploring? Yeah. And as much as like I love the idea growing up of like, oh, what would superheroes in the real world be like? I have very much come around over the years. Like, my favorite version of Batman is where the world is as weird as him and it's more operatic, and so you're not doing the world exactly as it exists outside our window. So it becomes tricky though, because how do you deal with things in the real world and villains dealing with or representing very real things in our very scary world right now, in a world that is so removed, like a place like Gotham, right? So it becomes allegorical more often than not.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you take whatever issue that you want to deal with and talk about or build a villain around to represent or as like a mouthpiece to explore, and how do you make them fit in this kind of like heightened stylized city that no one should be living in anymore, if we're being really honest. And I don't have a great answer beyond for like specific cases other than like, I think you just have to figure out a way to like take the things that you're afraid of and make them, in particular, things that feel identifiable to right now, and then place those in this like really interesting place and figure out what the ripple effects that are specific to the world that is Gotham and the people of that city would be, and then write that stuff.
That's a terrific answer that sort of leads me to another question. Drea, we've talked about Arkham Asylum before, and you've always sort of looked at the world as in our world, and you've sort of made Batman fit into this world, which makes sense because you're a psychologist trying to give actual information about our world. Arkham Asylum, the building itself, is interesting to me. The idea of an asylum for the criminally insane versus Black Gate Prison. You know, for starters, like we've talked on our show about the fact that insane is not a medical term; it's a legal term. It's how you determine whether someone was competent when they committed the crime. Would Arkham Asylum even exist? Does it work? It kind of seems like it doesn't in our world. And I know that you've worked in institutions before. Yeah. Talk to us about that.
Well, the first thing I want to say is that Arkham Asylum does not have to be perfectly realistic, because we're in this comic book genre, fantasy, sometimes science fiction. We're the role of the scientist or the technical consultant is to make the audience forget that there was this technical consulting happening, and to give the writers and creators space. It's really to get out their way. But there are some cases where it's really important, if you're going to have a show like HBO's Penguin, have a whole episode about Arkham Asylum and patients in this involuntary hospital interacting and spending this time together. How realistic do you want to get? There's actually a clip that I'm going to have you play here that is just a brief, it's like 2.5 minutes, and it's from Arkham Sessions, our podcast, in which we talk about one element of Arkham Asylum that we see in HBO's Penguin, and kind of start from there and then explain what we mean by does it need to be perfectly realistic. And this whole show is what I would consider a horrorization of mental health and mental health treatments. This is a way to make therapy into this very like non-consensual, nightmarish experience. And so I think it fits well within what the show is trying to do. I don't have a big problem with it because they didn't name this device. They didn't name this therapy.
But the device exists.
It does exist. And I'm actually going to send you a image of what this actually looks like. It's essentially what we call a light bar.
Okay.
You see the size of this bar. It's one light that basically moves back and forth.
It's not a red light.
It's not usually red.
It is a white light.
It's usually like a green or a blue or a white. It's not meant to be jarring or menacing. And the 3 lights that are on this giant display that Dr. Rush is using is very much an exaggeration of a real device. EMDR is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy. It has been approved and listed in the National Registry for evidence-based therapies. It's a practice that is widely used to help somebody who has post-traumatic stress disorder, and has been shown through research studies that this kind of therapy can reduce PTSD symptoms. Now, how does EMDR work? This is where there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered. So the therapy, or the meat of the therapy in EMDR, involves moving your eyes back and forth as you process a traumatic memory. You do not actually need a light bar to do this eye movement. In fact, the very first person who discovered EMDR was doing it like this, and I'm moving my fingers back and forth. I have concerns, clearly, about how this treatment remains unscientific in terms of the actual mechanisms that are responsible for the improvements in symptoms. I have yet to read the science that shows me and demonstrates to me that there is something fundamentally, scientifically more advanced than what's happening in more traditional trauma-focused therapy like exposure therapy and cognitive processing therapy.
Let me just point out, because you said it's going back and forth, and one might suggest, based on the way that they were presenting this therapy in the nature of this show, you'd almost think he was putting her into hypnosis.
I love that you said this.
Using, the classic look at the watch.
I love that you said this. The person who discovered EMDR
also discovered hypnosis.
No.
Oh.
So that's just a snapshot of what we talk about on the show. But going back to the technical, creative writing process that happens in HBO's Penguin, you all don't need to know that. But I think what's really great about a well-written comic book or adaptation or animated film or a show like HBO's Penguin is that the less they tell you, actually the better when it comes to some of these treatments and interventions and techniques and these, something like this, like a device that is almost this exaggerated version of something that might be used in a therapy session. And I would, recommend, in fact, that that gives the storytelling a lot of space for the audience to interpret that and to get the main gist of what's happening. So to answer your question, actually, when it comes to any kind of technical consulting, whether it's psychologists or archaeologists or biologists, the goal isn't always to get it 100% perfectly accurate. The goal is to get it believable. And I think they really did a good job of showing you something that is meant to be this intervention that even the client doesn't really know much about. But it's meant to be a backdrop. It's not meant to be the main point of the story. And I love seeing things like that where it just raises our curiosity about what Arkham Asylum might be like.
I want to ask Kyle, you are no stranger to using real-world mechanics in your own storytelling. I'm thinking specifically not about DC, but about when you brought back Darkhawk for Marvel. You even gave him the diagnosis of MS, and you dealt with a number of those issues. You did quite a bit of your own research on that as well. How does that affect your storytelling, and why do you think that it's so important?
Well, I think it's similar to my answer talking about which version of the world are you exploring. I think Marvel has a similar kind of situation, and when we decided to build a new Darkhawk, that became very apparent, where there's so many fantastical elements to the world that it's hard for it to really reflect what we come to think of and know of as, the everyday world. So you worry, do you lose some relatability when that becomes the case? And there's really kind of no way around that. I run a creator-owned superhero universe at Image Comics now called the Massiverse, and it's kind of headlined by our main book, Radiant Black, which I co-created and I write. And it's it's a very contemporary superhero book about two disillusioned millennials navigating failed dreams and crippling credit card debt with the help of miniature black holes and existential giant robots. So it's very much a book of the certain ages. And, we are constantly dealing with, we really are doing the world outside your window right now. I think that, it's something that I totally lost my train of thought. Sorry, what?
No, just in terms of using real world mechanics to drive your storytelling.
Yeah.
Darkhawk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even not even just Darkhawk.
Sorry, long walk to, if you can find something that's emotionally true and emotionally like current, then it doesn't matter whether the world is pushed or really true to what it is right now. So with Darkhawk, like finding something about like being young and thinking you know what your life is going to be and it's all laid out in front of you, and then, oh, surprise, you have multiple sclerosis, and that's before then becoming a superhero that involves like a synaptic connection in order to control the powers, but you have a neurodegenerative condition, you know, like that's all stuff that deals with, you know, there are people that deal with MS in a very, very real way.
Yeah.
So many people on a day-to-day basis. So it's something you haven't really seen explored too much before. So it feels as long as it's emotionally honest and it's true to the experience of navigating, you know, a disease like that, then I think I don't think it matters, I guess, what the world actually looks like.
Not to say that any of the villains that you tackled in DC necessarily went as far as giving them a diagnosis of MS or whatever, but have you looked at the real world mechanics and tried to infuse them into your work in DC as well, whether it's a villain, a hero?
Yeah, we did a number of different things. When I was doing Nightwing, there were a number of villains that were coming out of like interesting psychological places, and then I've carried that over, like especially in Radiant Black and the Massiverse. There's quite a bit of that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Ernie, I want to ask you about Batman Hush, which was, I thought, fantastically adapted. There were changes. There were significant changes done to the script. And by the way, having come from production for the last 25 years, I know those weren't all your decision. But but no.
Only the good ones.
Yeah, exactly. By no means do I want to like put you on the spot. But I want to ask you about taking such an iconic book, then, which by the way, handles basically every villain in Gotham City shows up in Batman Hush at some point in time. I want to ask you about adapting that, and if there were any particular favorite moments with those villains that you got to play with, if there were any specific challenges or hurdles that you had to deal with.
Yeah. Well, the biggest challenge, I guess, was the meant size of it. And yes, while it was meant to be a kind of a rogues gallery of Batman's greatest hits of villains, that to get Jim Lee to draw it, but the movie, obviously we did not get everybody in there, but we wanted to keep as much as we could. There's so many great bits. When you're adapting something, it's like you forget. Was this in there, or did I make this up whole cloth? So sometimes you get blamed for stuff. I mean, the biggest thing that we did was, everybody knows how Hush ends, right? In fact, when they were doing it in the first issue, this new person comes in. It's like, there's my childhood friend, Dr. Thomas Elliot. Weird stuff starting to happen. Who's doing it? Well, immediately letters came in. It's like, it's that guy. So they had to quickly, we need more red herrings, right? And I'm forgetting the DC person that was there. And they were like, we're okay with changing up a little bit the ending. And I thought if there could be anything done is like, let's not split the villain. Why don't we just make it the Riddler, but we superpower him for a second with a Lazarus pit, and that he had a brain tumor, it cured it, and now suddenly a lot of people play the Riddler as the Mad Hatter with riddles. Mm-hmm. And really, I wanted to make him like a super genius that was now also same size, but Bane-like strength that could fight toe-to-toe with Batman also, didn't have to run. So you would totally not suspect that it would be the Riddler when he's in the Thomas when he's in the Hush, costume. And, we really killed him, whereas he faked his death, right? So for some people, you get, attaboy, that's really fun, didn't expect it. And the other side is, you've ruined my childhood. Yeah. So, sorry for those childhoods I have ruined. My favorite bits are the Poison Ivy bit with Superman was fantastic, and Harley's scene. Anytime I get to write Harley, she's so fun. And of course, the Joker, because, the Joker's usually just on Arkham Rogues, right? I mean, he's number one. He's this. Not only is he brilliant, by the way, how many of Batman's rogues they all have doctorates.
Yeah.
A bunch of them are doctors, right?
Yeah.
Man-Bat, Hugo Strange, Dr. Freeze, and they have advanced degrees. Harley Quinzel, right? There's many of them. But the Joker is not only a genius, but he's got dissociative, is that a word? Am I making it up?
It's a word.
Mind. It's a broken mind. Yeah. So now Batman has to try and outthink a crazy person's plan, which is even harder than trying to stop Victor Freeze, because he's going to have some sort of logic. He's going to have a wand, and with the Joker, you don't know, and so Batman has to do that.
And so he kind of has to creep into and get close to immerse himself in psychopathy, because I totally agree with you that the Joker has this lack of empathy. He's unpredictable. There's no pathway to follow. If you're a detective, this is the wild card.
If you're a sane person, you have to jump into that pool, the crazy pool, and try and outthink a crazy person, which is really hard for a person with a code and stuff.
Yep.
And by the way, you brought up Victor Freeze a couple times there. So something we've talked about on our show a couple of times is this. Obviously, Victor Freeze, his last name is spelled differently than than Mr. Freeze. It made me think that at some point in time, Victor, the doctor, stopped existing, because he also drops his doctor. He's no longer. And by the way, I know a number of doctors at this point, and they never drop the doctors. Yeah. So they want to be known by
unless
their PhD,
they revoke
by
your
their
license.
like they want to be known.
Unless the licensing money was so good.
Right. Yes. So I find myself wondering.
Mr. became your first name.
100%. Yeah. So did that moment? Did he stop becoming Dr. Victor Freeze in order to become Mr. Freeze? And the look on Drea's face is like
what's so funny about this? I love this discussion, but can I also point out? Do you want to hear like a really entertaining behind the scenes anecdote on all this stuff? Okay, so what's amazing about this is that we are all debating this, right? When at the same time, our favorite character Hush. There is a very, 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 very high probability likelihood that Hush originally was going to be revealed to be Jason Todd.
Yes.
That is what was supposed to happen.
Right.
And then that's what the story was built to over the course of 9 issues by that point, I believe. Mm-hmm. And in the 11th hour, Jeff got cold feet, and they changed it to Tommy Elliott.
Yep.
Right? Now, Tommy Elliott did not exist before being the best friend of Bruce Wayne in the story of Hush, the childhood best friend retroactively, right? Fast forward all these years later, right? The first big work I do at DC after some character like biographies for the Night Runner or the origins for the Night Runner was I did this miniseries called Gates of Gotham, which is it's a murder mystery in Gotham City that has these ties to the late 1800s, and it's like Devil in the White City and the Men Who Built America, but in Gotham, okay? So I decide that one of the families of power of Gotham that are legacy families are the Elliots.
Yeah.
Okay? That ends up in the Matt Reeves Batman movie. The Elliott family, because I have a special thanks credit on the movie, and I didn't know what it was specifically for. And when I found out, it was for the contribution to the Elliott family, right? The Elliott family doesn't exist if the writer sticks to his original goddamn plan and it's Jason Todd. So,
and by the way, Red Hood wouldn't exist as he eventually did either. I mean, they were basically
so
saying,
why does he drop Doctor?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like he's just decided that was the old me.
Yeah.
I am now this guy. Unethical to the nth degree. I do not deserve my doctorate. It's that kind of mentality.
But do you see the ripple effects through these characters that we love? I love it. Like, I'm fascinated by it. Like, so many incredible creators through so many generations have touched these characters in this tapestry that everyone in this room, I guarantee you, has. If you're a comic fan or just even a movie fan or an animation fan, you have your version of Batman's origin in your head. Like, what the stories are that in your mind in comics would make up, that's the Batman origin, and maybe it culminates with Batman Beyond, or maybe it culminates with Dark Knight Returns, or maybe it culminates with, whatever. And I just love that this is like this character and a cast of supporting characters and villains that like has this effect on us, like, as culturally. It's awesome.
For sure.
Quickly, briefly, if I have that capacity to be brief, is just to say, to underscore what you're saying, because I would not have gone into the career that I went to as a clinical psychologist had I not been a Batman fan. That is not, I'm not exaggerating that. I was a nerdy kid watching Batman the Animated Series and becoming so just immersed in this universe, and I wanted to understand the mind and become one of these doctors that I saw, but not turn into a villain.
It's going to be interesting to see if you're going to turn into a hero or a villain.
It's still up for grabs. Who knows?
Harleen didn't necessarily think she was going to become a villain either, so good luck.
But it would be very right now if the villain was self-aware of the fact that they were becoming a villain, completing like a meme cycle.
Yeah.
So you're already there.
I do have to bring up a point on the previous thing of Mr. Freeze. You also have to put in that it could be writer mistake. Like, they thought up the name of a cool villain.
Yeah.
Check this out, Mr. Freeze, right? Well, okay, what's his backstory? Oh, he's a doctor. He's working with this, he's got a wife that's dying, and he does cold stuff. And
I agree with this.
Like, it could just be that. I mean, I asked Stan Lee. He was writing 12 or 15 comics a month.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so there's mistakes. There are just like flat out ball drops. And you're like, oh, well, and people go, that's canon now, or whatever. It's like, I wouldn't take too much of that like very seriously. So I asked Stanley, I'm like, why Craven the Hunter? Do you know what Craven means, right? It's like cowardly. He's like, yeah, but like when I put a K on it, it looked great. And I'm like, why isn't he like, I don't know, Courage the Hunter, or
what they don't realize is that he intended it to be K Raven, but no one saw the little hyphen that was in there.
And that could easily have happened. Like he could write with his sloppy writing, and all of a sudden the guy just the office secretary or something said Craven. Well, and there you go.
And you've all brought up, as a lot of us know, especially if you know the history of Batman the Animated Series, so many of these characters existed as just those gimmick characters. The character who has the freeze ray, the character that uses riddles, and then Alan Burnett and Paul Dini, these folks were all the ones who went, let's give them a deeper backstory. And I want to ask, because I personally love these backstories, but does a good villain require a good origin story the same way that our hero does?
I think it's like asking the question, do you want your car to go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds or to last 200,000 miles? They're two different engines.
Yeah.
So what are you building for? I don't think every character, every villain, if they're going to be built in service of being a threat to your hero, they don't all need that. But if you want one that has a chance to last, then it means you have to build them out of some motivation that is bigger than revenge or hatred of your main hero. If they're built that way, you might get one or two really good stories out of them, but it means they only really kind of have one functional use, which is to show up and try to kill the hero over and over again. If you want a character with depth who may run the risk, God forbid, of becoming an anti-hero because there's interesting stuff there to mine, I think those characters 100% need that, because that's the engine that's going to keep them running for many, many years.
Perfect.
I think that they get the answer for me is yes, absolutely. There was an origin somewhere, but you don't need to know it at first.
Yeah.
Unless the character gets popular, you don't really need to know it. But there are some of those where
We call those champagne problems.
Yeah. There's a bunch of characters where you go, oh, there was a fight between the superhero and bricks and a radioactive pile landed on the guy, and now it's like, I hate that guy because now I'm radioactive man, whatever, right? But the interesting part of the origin, I think, is how it affects the people that it happens to. Bruce Wayne, his parents get shot in an alley. Since he is raised to be the type of person he is, he turns into someone that's anti-crime and a force of good that's against evil. Frank Castle gets his child and wife killed, and he becomes a vigilante that kills anybody who's a bad guy because of his past experiences. So I guess I'm going to tromp a little in onto Drea's thing. I think the origin is less important than what came before it. So it is nurture, not nature.
There you go.
So, yeah, you could have a good guy or a bad guy with the same accident or origin. It just depends upon how you're going to write it.
I want to give folks an opportunity to ask your own questions about the characters. There is a mic here. I'm not sure. I mean, it's positioned pretty low. But I can also, you raised your hand right off the bat. So let's go to you first.
Yeah, so we have some villains that are megalomaniacs, right? They just want to take over the world, right? Zod. We have them that are, it's very personal. Maybe it's the Joker or, Mr. Freeze or Hush. What interests me are the villains that comment on society, right? We think about Poison Ivy.
Totally.
Ideological villains.
That actually speak to a very real issue. And so my question is, given particularly what's going on in the world and in our country right now, where we have environmental degradation and we have fascism on the rise, and Batman is to a certain degree, an agent of fascism, right? It's of order, law and order, versus when the system is fundamentally broken.
Especially if you're looking at Kingdom Come, when where he creates his own police robot state.
I guess my question is, how does that translate into the media that we're reading, and also how does that bring that link between fiction and what's really happening?
Well, I think there's two things to it. The first is that, this is what I was talking about wrestling with before, where you're talking about how much of the world outside your window are you trying to reflect? And in the case of something like Gotham, you can lean, this is its own place where the issues of this place are specific to this place in a way that it shields you from having to really navigate the dynamics of how some of the actual real world would probably reflect here, right? It's a really, really, really tough issue. I struggle with it because you want to be relevant and you want to be doing things that are reflections of their times, but you also don't want to browbeat anybody, and you don't want to preach. And so in my Radiant Black book, gun control is a thing for me, right? But I don't know that you would know that reading my work. Other than in Radiant Black, we have all these sci-fi weapons that are proliferating out, open source style, and they're essentially alien sci-fi guns, right? but that becomes our version of this thing that's specific to the world that represents so much more and such a bigger thing. But you're not coming out and talking about AK-47s on the South Side. You know, like I'm not going to write that story, and no one really wants to read that story. But then how do you actually have characters and villains who are reflective of the things that we are all dealing with and worried about? You know, that's the dilemma. That's the struggle. Allegory to me, like it's the best way to go, because at the very least what it does is, even whether it's an issue that's important to you that you are trying to reflect through a villain, or you just think it's interesting to explore the perspective of a villain of, I think the more that you can deliver something in a way that it doesn't feel or run the risk of coming off as confrontational, the better. Like, put it through 2 levels removed or layers removed so that someone can dig deeper to try to, you know what I mean, understand what it's referencing. And I think that if you can find a way to do that with things that are specific to Gotham as a place, then you've got something that it's like you understand the allegory because it's riffing on, you know, the elements that are specific to Gotham.
I had to start to think about this when fandom asked me to do a series of Joker articles for each of the Jokers. I left Jared Leto out. There just honestly wasn't enough there. But it was a helpful exercise for me, because what I did was realize as I wrote these pieces is that each of the Jokers were representing a villain in the context of their time and in the context of their society. So Jack Nicholson was a subversion of this like capitalist late 80s place we were in, defacing art museums, things like that. Heath Ledger was the anarchist, and so kind of operating in this really scary place of us discovering that people were lawless and just doing things to rile up society, and that was particularly horrific. And then, you know, Joaquin Phoenix was the incel, or the thwarted, the kid who was bullied and had loneliness and thwarted belongingness, and then resorted to violence. The system failed him, therapy failed him, society failed him. And I think we even got fatigued with that because we kind of moved on after that first movie. So I really like the question because it asks us to really think about the interpretation of villains and how important it is that it's not a one-sided, you know, I work in media engagement, it's not a one-sided relationship, that it's a dynamic relationship that we're kind of engaged with and integrating ourselves with the stories that we're consuming. So it's a really important thing to keep in mind.
We've been given the one more question. So let's. I'm going to decide. So let me to this gentleman. We've got about 3 minutes. So quick question, quick answer.
Okay. So I find that sometimes the scariest villains are the ones that point in some way to our capacity for evil. That is, to the capacity for evil that exists within each of us.
Sure.
I was wondering if you guys have villains that you can think of that you're particularly drawn to that fit into that sort of box.
Oh.
Sure. Yeah. Go for it.
You know, I mean, I've done a bunch of these things, but there's just like a couple that I've never done before, and like I'd like to do a ventriloquist story, because I think that's kind of an interesting thing.
Yes.
You know, and it's like doing a twofer, right?
Yeah.
You get like the two characters, and you know, I mean, Joker's great because it's kind of like the, you know, the big battle, right?
And it's the catch-all. Depending on what you want to write at any given moment, the Joker can literally be any of those characters.
Right. But I'd love to do a Batman story where he has to kind of, it would be like in a Constantine Hellblazer world where he has to see some awful like human sacrifice stuff and do a horror Batman.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
I would love to do that, but I don't think they want to go that direction. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, I'm thinking about, I want to do, it's Batman versus the ultimate threat, the therapist, and it's just a 6-issue, 6-part session of Batman's. And by the end of it, he comes out and he's cured, and DC's sales plummet as a result.
Yeah.
No. You know what? I love writing the Joker, and it's so much fun because it's anarchy, it's chaos, but it's also the Joker I like writing. There's this very sly kind of element to the character. My girlfriend is from Australia, and she will describe it as something as being cheeky. So I think there's a cheekiness to the Joker where it's like, oh, that's clever, but also like sadistic and terrifying at the same time. Yeah. And so that's like an escape. Like I think that's enjoyable because I hate horror. I don't watch horror. I have no interest in it. I don't like it. But I do like writing really, really twisted Joker sequences. But yeah, I mean, I think there are different elements of different villains that speak to you. That I'm trying to think of any other ones. But the Man of Riddles kind of approach, like the
Sure.
Riddler, like things that play with puzzles, I think are really interesting and contraptions and then it was so fun. Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then I just love Man-Bat and Clayface.
I was just gonna say.
Another doctor.
For no reason.
Another
Doctor.
Another doctor. So to answer your question, the monsters, Clayface, Man-Bat, Killer Croc, the ones who can't kind of hide behind a visage that might pass or that might seem to integrate easily into society, so they have to kind of figure out, am I good, am I bad? Everyone tells me I'm bad, so the analysis of that and processing that. And I think a lot of us kind of feel like monsters sometimes. We're not perfect. We have setbacks, we have flaws, and we have to think about our actions and behaviors, and what better way to explore that than with all the characters that these folks are writing.
All right, so super quickly, let us know where folks can find you online, or do you have a way of?
Yes, on X, Facebook, and Instagram, I'm at Ernie Altbacker.
Fantastic.
So I'm predominantly using a newsletter these days, but it's for my company, Black Market Narrative, where we do our line of books like The Massiverse and No One, which if you like Batman, it started as a Batman book I was doing with Tim Sale, actually. That was going to be like a long Halloween type sequel, and it morphed over the years, and then Tim passed away, and so we dedicated the first issue of this to him, but it's a creator-owned Batman-esque series with Lauren Lester from Batman the Animated Series.
Played Robin.
Robin and Nightwing. He voices this character No One for us because it's a multimedia series. There's a big scripted audio series component to it and everything. You can go to blackmarket.la. That's my website. That's our company. And there's a newsletter there that you can sign up for, and we do all sorts of really cool like original stories. It's for free and everything. That's the best place to find me.
Fantastic.
And then this weekend I'm in I believe aisle or row F in Artist Alley. F something. It's in the front.
Great.
Yeah.
Great.
You can find my website, drdreapsychology.com, which has all the things I've written or contributed to, some of my events. My social media handle is also Dr. Drea Psychology, mostly on Instagram. I want to pitch a science mixer, which is this Sunday at 10 o'clock on the 200 level. You might have to look it up in the program. But if you're interested in science consultation, not just psychology, but other disciplines, please come to that, ask your questions, get in the mix. It's real cool. And then, of course, our podcast.
At the Arkham Sessions on Instagram, anywhere you find your podcasts. Everyone, please enjoy the rest of your WonderCon. Stick around for the next panel. They're going to be analyzing the Penguin, which is going to be a lot of fun. And I hope you all have a great night.